Hey there. Welcome to History Chats this afternoon. Hey, I'm Ben Clark. I am the archivist and historian here at the Marathon County Historical Society, and today, I'm often the person who introduces these anyway. Usually I produce the History Chats and doing something a little different on the scene. So this is a corner of our most recent exhibit here. This is Peek Inside, which is a look at the art things that we collect here at the Historical Society that we've collected over the years. And I wanted to, I've had the chance, in addition to working with the archives and research and all of that sort of stuff, doing programs like this, I've also had the chance to do some exhibits like this one here. I've been part of the team that built this. And, whenever you put an exhibit together, you always find things that either don't get into the exhibit for interesting reasons, or the decisions of why you choose this or that. There's often a lot of thought that goes into that. And sometimes you uncover stories that you just go, I want to share this with someone, but there's not enough room in this. Like, nobody's going to want to sit there and read an entire dissertation. It's usually not that long. Don't worry, we're not going to go that deep. But just explain the full story of why this thing is interesting. And so that is what I thought we would do in this video here. So specifically, I wanted to look at this cabinet here. This is an audio cabinet. This is what we use to allow visitors to listen to some music or audio clips, I guess, of various sorts. So, for example, this one has 8 buttons. You can pick up one of these receivers. Both of them have the same audio. And you click a button. Let's just do here. This is an interview with Ed Schoenberger from 1975.
Was started in 1952. Of course, we owe this wonderful house as a gift from Mrs. Wood.
All right, we'll save the full thing. You have to come in and hear the whole story there. There we go. So, by doing that, you can, hear the audio clips. I tried to edit them down to about 90 seconds or so, about a minute or two, so that you don't have to sit there and listen to a whole 15 minute interview or, a full 4-minute song or something like that. So there's a variety. We have 8 of these. Again, we have a lot of different things in our collection that we have, right? And picking those 8 was an interesting challenge. There were some things that I wanted to get in here that didn't get in here. Ultimately, what I ended up doing is a mix of straight music from performances in various sorts, as well as some interviews and things like that represent the wider scale of the things that we collect. But for example, I wanted to get some Hmong interviews, for example. We have some interviews with members of the Hmong community that settled here in Marathon County. And for a variety of reasons, some of them, the actual audio wasn't great. They were done, and the recording, the microphone was a little too far away to really get a full sense of what they were saying, or the translation wasn't particularly clear. But I wanted to kind of represent that, and ultimately there was a couple different options, and I thought I had one that kind of worked, and I played it for the other members of the exhibit team, and the sound recording just never got good enough that you could hear very clearly. So sometimes you're limited in that regard. But for the most part, the ones that I ended up picking, I think, like a lot of the stuff in the exhibits that we put together, in this one in particular, even though there are some things that didn't make it into the exhibit for various reasons, there's a lot of other things that we could choose from that we've collected. So we do have 8. I think I'm fairly happy with the 8 that we have here. I'm going to pause this here. We'll put a cut, and then I'm going to bring in some more stuff to show you. Just a second. Okay. So one of the interesting things about doing an audio or any audio-visual things, whether that's a cabinet like this or like the television where you have some silent movie footage playing, or even actually, to be honest, some of even the pictures that we reproduced or did in making those decisions, one of the interesting things that comes about this is, unlike everything else, the physical objects that contain the audio recordings or visual recordings are put into a different format for the people to enjoy in the exhibit. You can enjoy the fact that we have this, the disc with, the pressing of Aw Shucks by the Lavenders, which is one of the things that you can listen to here. This is from 1963 by Kuka Records. Robin Lee and the Lavenders, of course, being an important sort of rock group. This one I picked in particular because it has a little bit more of a country feel to it, kind of another aspect of that recording. And this is very cool. Just to give you kind of an idea of the range of things we have. So we have this. Obviously, this isn't what I used. It's not, putting the needle down and playing it inside the cabinet. We had actually got somebody who had already digitized this and just edited it down a little bit for this particular recording. Similarly, we have these cassette tapes. These are from the 75, 76 interviews that were done. Let's say notes in here. Here we go. I know it doesn't matter, you can't tell the difference, but this is Ed Schoenberger interview. That's the one that I played here. Ed was the, back in 1976, we did a bunch of interviews as really the first oral interview process in Marathon County. And that was basically to recognize the American centennial, the bicentennial, I should say, of the American Revolution. And as a result, we interviewed a lot of people, quite a few of these cassette tapes. One of them was the director here at the Marathon County Historical Society. Well, not here, it's across the street at the time in the Yawkey House Museum. Ed Schoenberger. And so that's another good one. So these were essentially, the difference between the disc, the Lavenders that was created professionally to be listened to, compare that to, this, which was sort of a step in creating an oral interview, which then, could get edited or repurposed. Other example here, these are cassette tapes from the 1989 performance of the Messiah, the Handel's Messiah Mass. It being the Messiah, which is something that people have been coming to Wausau for years. Going back, I think, to the 40s and 50s, there was an annual performance of this, the Mass, and it was a thing around which the community gathered every year, and it was a big part of the holidays, right? Well, it being, the Mass that it is, I think they did the version where it was about an hour shorter than the full version. They did the 2 acts. Culminating with the, Hallelujah chorus, which is what I ended up putting on the thing, probably the most recognizable part of the Mass. But there's actually 2 cassette tapes. It didn't fit on one of them. So whether it's something that is formally created to be listened to, or a byproduct of a live performance, or something that has been done for the sake of posterity so that we can interview them, they all kind of fit in here. One of the interesting things, though, whether I used the original recording off of this, digitize it myself like I did with the cassette tapes, or whether it was something else that somebody else did, usually there's a step. We have access to an original copy. Not so much with one of these. Well, actually, there's 2 of them that we're going to talk about in more depth. The first one is a recording from 1940 of the Don Rasmussen Orchestra, a live performance from the Met's Tap Room in Wausau. This is the introduction, including a little bit of the song "Between the Devil and the Deep Blue Sea." It's an interesting story with that. So the box that this is all sitting on here is from Rudy Topenka. Some of you may know Rudy as being a media guy. He was involved in radio and television, FM, AM. He spun discs as a jockey there, a disc jockey. He also read the news, did interviews, did all sorts of things. One of the things that he ended up doing as well on the radio. He also, by the way, did, of course, television. Some of you may remember it's the 1950s, so of course we had to do a in-studio recording, a television program of a cowboy thing for kids. So he was Rudy the Wrangler, among other different programs that he was part of. Back then they did a lot more focus on live, local people, whether it was live or pre-taped. It was a lot of local talent before it kind of, got outsourced with syndication and things like that. And to wit, back in the 40s, they recorded a version of this thing as part of a live performance of the Don Rasmussen Orchestra. The thing is, and according to Rudy, this is the story of how he ended up getting his hands on this. It wasn't a simple matter of, hey, we just took that recording, right? It went over the airwaves. Back then, they did not intend for radio programs to be listened to after they went out. There it is, right? But the thing is, they didn't actually run a microphone cable from the Met's Tap Room to the studio. Instead, what they did is they made a temporary recording, an acetate record. A little less, long-term. It wouldn't be something that you would use, compared to some more durable, discs. But it was something that they could make a pressing there as part of the live performance, and then they would grab that record and they would take it back to the studio, and there they would then play it for the radio. After that was over, frequently what they would do is they would just resurface that, and then they would send it out and do it again, right? Use it over and over. But occasionally, they would have some of these that stuck around the studio, the radio station, and when sound technicians needed to test something, they would pull that out and put it on there, just to have something to play that you knew nearby that you could do. And for whatever reason, a handful of these just stuck around until one day they decided they were going to toss them. And Rudy said, "Hey, wait, hold on." And so he was able to then, save them from destruction and restore them. And then he had this annual program where every year he would go back on. Even after he retired from the radio, he would do these anniversary shows. So the anniversary of WSAU radio back in 1936. And so they would get, people like Buck Leverton, old recognizable radio personalities. They would get local community members, the old police chief, politicians, people like that on and reminisce. And they'd play the old music that they were fond of from the 30s and 40s and 50s. And then he would also play some of these clips that he had salvaged. Now, again, those radio programs were not necessarily, they're sent out in the airwaves. There's nobody at the studio making a recording of every minute of every programming they do. But Rudy Topenka, being the history-minded guy he was, made cassette tape recordings of his live programs, which as you can see some examples of here, is after he died, his children donated a good number of these to us. And so it's the cassette tapes of the radio broadcast where he replayed a salvaged recording of a temporary record of a radio broadcast from 1940. And thankfully he did, because it's a pretty fun recording. So there you go. That is some interesting stories. Any of these we could probably go into more detail on. There's one more, though, that I want to talk about, which is the Barbershop Quartet singing program that I have here, which took a little bit more work than just digitizing. And to explain, I'm going to put a cut in here, and we're going to jump over to the studio where I can show you and tell that story more in depth. Okay, here we are. Now we're in the recording room, and I want to tell you about the Barbershop Quartet recording. That all comes from this collection, by the way. Like I said, down in the exhibit space, everything that we have is either maybe there's a digital file that we created with a digital recorder, or they're cassette tapes. Sometimes we have an audio collection that is just audio stuff. It's just a bunch of cassette tapes. Sometimes, as in the case here with the Barbershop Quartet groups, specifically this is River Valley Harmonizers is the group that donated this collection to us. There's actually a variety of things. So we do have cassette tapes. There are VHSs and DVDs and CDs, different formats. They also have some scrapbooks and some transparency slides and photographs. So it's a mishmash of different things, which is often the case. But the thing that spoke to me that I went, I want to do something with that is actually these right here. So there should be a fourth one. That should be, I didn't realize when I was going through this originally that, hey, they're the same concert. Well, here, let's see if it'll focus. There we go. So this is the Wassa chapter of the Sebsquasa. We'll get to that in a second. This is the lead one. If I hold up here, this is the baritone part. Or no, sorry, this is the bass one. And then I have the baritone. There would be a tenor. Don't have that. This is from a concert called The Heritage of Harmony that was published by the National Organization of Sebsqua. I'm probably pronouncing the acronyms there. It's an acronym. It stands for the Society for the Preservation and Encouragement of Barbershop Quartet Singing in America, which it's one of those. It's a byproduct of a bygone era. You can look into that if you want. These days they go by the Barbershop Quartet or Barbershop Harmony Society, which is a lot easier to say in theory. But this is Barbershop Quartet singing, right? There's 4 people singing. I think technically barbershop quartet is usually men. Usually Sweet Adeline is the sort of the equivalent for women, but it is all part of the same tradition of singing in this kind of harmony with four voices, usually a cappella without any accompaniment. And it is very much a big part of American, Americana, really. And so this concert here that these tapes were put together, each of these corresponds to a different part that you would sing as part of a special concert. They did some arrangements of some classic songs that you could sing locally, right? And the reason there's four of these, or three of them in our collection. I don't know what happened to the fourth one. Apparently nobody, somebody didn't return it or kept it or whatever. I couldn't find, I'm sure that there are other recordings out there someplace, but this is not common enough for I wasn't able to get my hands on the tenor part, but there would be a tenor part as well. This is a full-on, concert of music. So I picked one of the pieces that I thought people would recognize. I'm not going to introduce it. You'll catch it. This is the digital, so I digitized them, right, into an audio recording. This is the lead part. This is from the baritone part, and this is from the bass, right? So I recorded them all. I put them in order. Well, part of the question you might be wondering is why do we have four different recordings? And if you just listen to the lead part, you might kind of not understand this quite right. Well, here, let's start at the beginning, actually.
Broadway, Broadway, I'm missing you so, Broadway.
Figured it out yet? This is Give My Regards to Broadway. Classic American song. It's a great barbershop song as well. Just listening to the lead, you're going to get the melody. And then you can hear that there are other parts in there. It's not just the lead part. If we flip to the bass part, these are notes that you're probably not used to hearing on their own, and this sort of prominently.
Give my regards to Broadway, remember me to Herald Square.
And then baritone is an interior voice, maybe even less intuitive if you're not familiar here.
Tell all the gang at 42nd Street that I will soon be there.
Interesting, right? So the reason they're doing this is because, barbershop harmony is interesting. It's not like, how do you learn how to sing this is an interesting question that you maybe haven't thought about. Because it's not like you can just read off, here's the sheet music. You could just go, all right, here's the notes. Even sitting down at a piano and plunking out your part, that's not necessarily the best way to learn because the music isn't necessarily written in that way. It's written to be sung. And really the best way to learn this is to just do it. It's just to sing. And this is one of the reasons that often in barbershop groups, it's not just four people singing. It is a choir of people singing. And they're singing four different parts, but that way you can kind of work with other people that are singing the same part to kind of learn what those harmonies should sound like. But the difficulty is, short of getting some friends over to sing with you on a Thursday night when you want to practice, that's not always feasible. So how do you practice on your own? Well, one of the solutions is you get a tape like this. And I should say these were produced by the national organization of the Barbershop Harmony Society. We also have versions that are locally done too. And some of these are maybe more simpler. It is somebody just plunking the notes at a piano, so you can sing along, you can hear those notes. Later on, there's some CDs that have some some digital scores that'll you can hear all the parts, but one is louder. And that's a great way to learn. But again, 1988, when they released this as part of the concert series, this is one of the ways you do it. And I thought that's a really cool story, right? On the surface, that's not something that you would expect with, oh, here's a recording of some barbershop singing. There's a reason why this. And so what I thought would be very cool is to just play this. I'll record them all, which I did. Digitally, I'll line them all up, and I can just flip between one and the other like I did here, right? So,
Tell all the gang at 42nd Street that I will soon be there.
And that's a really cool way to do that, right? But here's an interesting thing that came about. I haven't played this yet, but I also included the tuning note, the pitch pipe, and then they harmonize. So it sounds like this. Which incidentally is a good thing to do because if you're learning to sing in a barbershop quartet singing, part of the process is how do you start? And so if you're not familiar with like what notes you need to harmonize with, that's a great way to do that. And so I thought, oh, that'd be cool. Let's listen to all, I'll make sure that they can line up at the start of the tuning note. So I did that. I don't know if you heard that. You might not notice what you're hearing. Honestly, it took me a lot of intensive listening, trying to get everything accurate for me to kind of catch this. For one, on the surface, you might have caught that this sounds a little different. So if I flip between the solo and just one of the notes and all three tracks, you'll hear that it gets a little fuller, a little bit thicker of the sound. It sounds like three different notes being played at the same time, right? Or if I just play them all together, if you're musical and you're kind of you might hear a little bit of warbling that indicates that it's slightly out of tune with itself. It's not bad. It's very close. And I thought, oh, that's interesting. I guess physically these tapes are on the materials degrade a little bit over time, and maybe they just were stored slightly different, and so there's a little bit of degradation, and that causes that's kind of interesting. But then I continued and was like, all right, here's the start. Broadway. That's all of them starting Broadway. They all started enunciated Broadway. And then to my confusion, as you go on, whisper of I'm yearning to mingle with the old time throng. I don't know if you can hear that. I'm going to remove the bass just so it's a little clearer, just between the two, the lead and the Barry parts. You'll hear... Won't you give my regards to old Broadway and say that I'll be there ere long. Got there in the end, but they are not in sync. I thought that's weird, so I shifted the baritone so that these are all at the same time, and then the beginning didn't fit. And that's when I realized that I had been assuming that the way that they recorded this back in the 1980s was they recorded the concert. They had all of the guys mic'd, so the tenor, the Barry, this lead, and the bass, they all had a microphone in front of them, sang through the concert, and some, sound engineer would then sit at the boards and go, all right, let's kick up the lead voice. All right, let's do one with the Barry. And then they would render or, output a recording that would be mixed differently for each of the things. But it's clear that's not what they did. What they did, and I don't know if this was intentional for whatever reason, or if it was a limitation of they didn't have enough microphones, or they didn't have somebody who could do this sound mixing, but they literally sang through the concert 4 times, and they took the microphone and they moved it, or they had the guy who was being featured stand closer to the microphone so that they had that voice picked up more prominently than the others. Because all of 4 voices are mixed in all of these, but as we can tell, they're not together. And so this is really interesting, right? Now, partially, there's a couple things that are interesting about this. One, this would probably happen to an extent anyway. These are 4 very good musicians, and part of the process of being able to sing at this level is you react and sort of work with the other people. It's that collaboration. And so even if they recorded with the exact same setup, featuring the same microphone in the same place, and they did it 4 times, each of those times are going to be slightly different because, if you put them all 4 of them like this is here, where they're on a track and you quantize it, you try to put a click track, they're going to be a little bit of a give and pull because that is the nature of how you sing. There's expressiveness, there's a little bit of a slowing down and speeding up to kind of fit the mood. And you're going to follow. And these guys are good at picking up on that. And so there's a little bit of give and pull. But as you can see, they all end up at the very end, even though they might not hit at the same time. They get there in the end. So there's that sensibility of they know how this all fits together, but how they get there might change. And when you add to that the fact that they might be used to listening to certain voices to kind of keep the feel, like there's those dynamics within the group that maybe the lead guy is going to kind of lay down because we're listening for him and we're kind of following him. Well, if now the baritone is the part, that interior voice is the one that everybody's listening for because that's the prominent voice that's being said, well, he might be singing a little differently. His natural inclination might be different than the lead person. And so this is maybe a little bit even more exaggerated over the course of this. And ultimately, it doesn't really matter, right? What I ended up doing is, flitting between the three here. I just copied them over. I did end up doing this thing where with the tuning note, just because you hear in the lead voice, you hear the lead and the tenor, the second voice, a little bit more prominently than the other two. I added in, let's see here, just to get a little bit more on the bottom end there. But starting with the Broadway from the lead voice, I give him the introduction and the first phrase. Then we go over to the baritone, and I would have given him one and then the tenor one, but obviously we don't have the tenor part, so that he gets two. And then we end with the bass part.
Want to give my regards to old Broadway and say that I'll be there ere long.
And even just if I play them all here, I guess I didn't need to mute everybody. You just get the one.
I'm thrown. Want to give my.
Even though there are slightly different points, in the mix, you don't notice that if you just hear them one at a time. So it ends up working out. I will say, looking back at this to try to explain my process, I kind of wish that I had kept that first introduction with all three voices to get that fuller sound and then filtered them out. But oh well, it's too late for that. That would have been interesting to maybe a better representation. But hey, I had 8 of these to do, and this was more complicated than I intended. When I did not start out thinking that I knew it was going to be a little ambitious to say, I'm going to record not just 1, but 3, and I'm going to mix them together. But I didn't expect that there would be a discovery of the process of how they designed this. How did they record this? And that is just a great example of how, in the process of putting an exhibit together, you get these interesting stories. You learn about the objects that you're putting in and the stories that you're telling in a deeper sense. And then you have to say, all right, well, I can't explain all of this in a text stand. All of this story that goes beyond this you need to be able to show the different parts and to show that they don't line up together. That's hard to just explain. So if you can't do that, all right, well, I'll just explain the concept and get the idea across. And so again, the back of my mind is like, I saved this project so that I could go back and do a video or something with this. And so here we are. And there's a lot of these stories. As I said, over the course of doing an exhibit, there's a lot of things that get left out, or interesting discussions about, well, why are we doing it this way versus that way? And that was kind of the point of the program here. Yeah, is this interesting? Is this something that you'd want to see us return to? Like I said, we do have this new exhibit, Peek Inside, which is opened here in the summer of 2023. We also have some existing other exhibits. We have the Parks exhibit. We have our Stories exhibit. There are exhibits that we don't have up anymore that we could go back and revisit. There's a lot of stories that could be told to kind of feature some of the things. Maybe give some interesting background, and maybe if you're watching this and haven't come out and see the new exhibit, this is your opportunity to hear Broadway and Between the Devil and the Deep Blue Sea for yourself, and now you have more context. But yeah, we'll maybe come back to this if people are interested, or we decide that it's a story we want to tell. In any case, thanks for watching. I think that's where we're going to call it for today. I don't know what's coming up next week. I haven't quite figured that out as of the recording of this, but I'm sure it's something good. Keep an eye out. We do this every week, Thursday at 12:30, a new video or live program, and we hope you join us for that. And in the meantime, have a wonderful day. Come on back next time. We'll see you next time for some more local history. Thanks for watching.